We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar. Unfortunately, most of our knowledge of the story of the wise men seems to come not from the Bible, but from a hymn that gets almost, unfortunately, every detail wrong. Three kings of Orient. We're never told in Matthew that there are three. They're never called kings, they're called magi or wise men. We're not told they're from the Orient, they do come from the East. It never tells us that they followed the star, or in the chorus it says, "Star of wonder, star of night, star with royal beauty bright." The Bible never mentions that the star is particularly bright. Maybe we get some of our theology, our story of the wise men from Christmas card pictures. They don't mention camels in the Bible, and they're never given any names. The actual New Testament account is found in Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, and it is the only mention of the star in the entire Bible. It's never mentioned in the story of the shepherds in Luke. Here it is, Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, 'But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, 'Go and search carefully for the young child, and when you found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also.' When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they'd come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way." What did these wise men see in the sky that led them first to Jerusalem, and then to Bethlehem, and ultimately to Jesus? Hi, I'm Pastor Jeff Hartman, First Baptist Church of Troy, North Carolina. And tonight is a special message for Christmas on the Star of Bethlehem. I'll call it, "We Have Seen His Star." What did they see that led them to Jesus? We have to ask the first question, what was the star? If this is not just a fanciful legend, but historical fact, what clues are there in the historical text, Matthew chapter 2, that might help us understand what they actually saw? I'd like to detail for you 7 characteristics of the star according to Matthew. First of all, it is a single heavenly body according to the word star. The Greek word is aster, sounds a little bit like our star. It is the word from which we get asteroid. In a singular way, this is a lesser heavenly body, not the sun or the moon, but one of the lesser bodies, the stars, not necessarily our stars, foreign suns, but it could be planets. Planets are part of the stars. They would be called technically wandering stars. But somehow it had, secondly, special significance. It's not just a star, but it is his star. What made it? There's no name on it. There's no label. It had to have something specific that would tie it to a Jewish and a Jewish king. We are not told what this significance was. Third, it would have a specific location. They saw it in the east. We'll discuss later what that might mean. Fourth, it was a simple phenomenon. Very importantly, It is not, it can't be a conspicuously bright object, visible. It's got to be visible, they saw it. But it can't be so obvious like we see in our Christmas cards, because no one else saw it. Joseph, Mary, the shepherds, Herod, they inquired, when did it show up? Because they didn't actually understand that this was a star signifying the King of the Jews. We get the idea that no one else, maybe they saw it, but they didn't understand the significance. Fifth, it had some sort of sporadic appearance, that it disappeared and reappeared because the wise men get so overjoyed when they see it again upon leaving Jerusalem to go to Bethlehem. They said, behold, there it is, surprise. Sixth, this is very important. It did not lead them to Jerusalem. They saw the star in the east, but they went west to Jerusalem because they were seeking the one who was born King of the Jews. Naturally, you'd go to Jerusalem. So a woman might say these were wise men because they stopped and asked for directions. My wife kids me because I don't stop and ask directions. They went to Jerusalem and asked, where is he? They were in the east, and maybe they saw it in the east, but they were in the east when they saw it, and it would have led them westward. It was not westward leading necessarily. It led them to go to Jerusalem, and it didn't lead them to go to Bethlehem. They found out that he would be born in Bethlehem, 6 miles south of Jerusalem, but the star didn't necessarily lead them to Jerusalem or to Bethlehem. Most important, seventh, most miraculous, not its size, not its brightness, is this one characteristic, its stationary quality. Stars move, but this one stood over where Jesus was born. This one stood. What could that possibly mean? We need to look in the sky if this is not some one-time miracle for something that would explain the appearance of this star. So first we have to ask, is this a UFO? Is this a one-time thing, a supernatural sign? In the Old Testament, God did send a pillar of fire to lead Israel in the wilderness by night. They didn't mistake this pillar of fire for one of the other stars. It led them, and it stopped. And it signified the presence of God. That would be great. Now they finally have the pillar of fire back. He's back. God is here in the person of Jesus. But it doesn't seem to fit the story here because they called it a star. They didn't call it a pillar of fire. It didn't look like the other stars. And why would that have any significance, a pillar of fire, to some foreign Gentiles? A pillar of fire wouldn't necessarily mean anything to them. How about they had to inquire, when did it show up? Because no one else saw it. So it wasn't a spectacular pillar of fire that nobody could miss. As attractive as that seems at first, we probably have to dismiss that theory because it doesn't really fit the evidence. So it seems that it has to be some sort of natural heavenly phenomenon. So some astronomical phenomenon. And the good thing about this is we can trace the movements of stars and planets very accurately back 2,000 years. We have accurate records of sightings of eclipses and meteors and meteorites. These things we call shooting stars are not technically stars, other suns, but could it be a meteor? That would be a natural appearance. We're not explaining away the miracle, we're just explaining what they saw. But it couldn't be a meteor. It's certain, sometimes meteors come in showers. It was not a meteor shower, it was singular, one star. But why would a meteor have any significance to be his star? Simple phenomenon. If it was a phenomenal meteor, they wouldn't have had to ask, a simple phenomenon. They never reappear, so you wouldn't have the sporadic appearance. Look, there it is again. It would be a different meteor. It would not go before them in a southerly direction, and it certainly, meteors never stand still. So more likely, if it is just a natural phenomenon in the sky, maybe it would be a comet. This was the first guess of any Christian theologian. Origen in 200 AD guessed that it was a comet. Comets don't just flash across the sky like a shooting star or a meteor. They proceed very slowly across the sky. The most famous comet of all, of course, is Halley's Comet, which appeared in 12 BC. They do persist in the sky. They have a tail, but they don't appear to be moving. We can't really see. It takes a long time for them to go across the sky, but I don't think this fits very well either. What significance would a comet have? Comets come on a regular basis, and they wouldn't be particularly shocked by it. Why would it have significance as the king of the Jews? As a matter of fact, comets normally are considered in ancient days bad omens. It can't be something that no one else would notice. Remember, no one saw it. It's not just a simple phenomenon. They had to acquire, oh, there was this great star. And the sporadic appearance, no, actually, comets don't come and go over the nights. It may appear for several months at a time, but it doesn't come and go unless you got a cloudy night, and so it just really doesn't fit. In April of 4 BC, there is a Chinese record of a comet without a tail, which is probably what we call a supernova. Supernovas, nova means new. It's not a new star, it's actually a former star. It is technically the death of a star that has used up its nuclear fuel. When these stars collapse into highly concentrated matter, they flare up to hundreds of millions of times their natural brightness, and then they fade over weeks. They glow and they fade away. Now that may fit the picture you get on a lot of your Christmas cards of a great big glowing ball in the sky with a huge tail. But unfortunately, a supernova doesn't actually fit the text. What significance would a supernova have? They start flashy and then they turn rather dull. It's a light burning out. It's not a new star, it's actually a dying star. It's not a simple, it is a simple phenomenon, number 4. And so Herod wouldn't have asked, when did it show up? Because everyone would have noticed it. And of course, supernovas never reappear. They fade out gradually. By far the best candidate for a heavenly body, an astronomical phenomenon that would fit this would be, among the heavenly bodies, we sometimes see them as stars, is planets. They are planets, which means wandering stars. All the rest of the stars move across the sky in a normal pattern. They spin around our poles, and there are just a few that never really fit because they went different than they proceeded across the sky in a different way. So they called them planets, and we found out the reason is because they're not distant stars, but they are not stars at all, but planets within our solar system. In 1600 AD, Kepler discovered why the planets have this different kind of motion. The brightest of all of the stars, which is actually a planet, other than the sun, moon, the third brightest object in the evening sky is Venus. Venus is the closest star to us and is closer to the sun than us. Planet Venus, sometimes called the morning star, would fit a lot of these characteristics that we have here. The term star would have been used for Venus. It was a wandering star, but it was a star. And Venus had a significance to them. It meant something. It does arise in the east each evening. If you take a walk early in the evening, the first star you see tonight might be Venus. Others would see it but not understand it and necessarily take notice of it. It would be under their noses every night, but they wouldn't get the significance. It does reappear. It is in the southerly sky, which would lead them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Bethlehem is 6 miles south. 7 stationary qualities stood over. Actually, we'll see later there is some significance there as well. I'll save that for last. But I want you to remember that God made the stars, the sun, the moon, and the planets, for illumination, to light up the day and to light up the night, and for signs for us. In Genesis chapter 1, the very first chapter of the Bible, verse 14, God says, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be, sun, moon, and stars, for signs and seasons, for days and years, and let them be for the lights of the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and it was so. Notice, signs come even before light. God gave them to us as signs. It had been prophesied long ago in Numbers chapter 24, verse 17. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab, and destroy all the sons of tumult. This prophecy of Balaam, is it possible that Gentile astronomers looking for signs in the heavens, saw that star when God's people didn't? Maybe they just weren't looking. Why, Jesus even calls himself the bright and morning star in Revelation chapter 22, verse 16. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright and the morning star. Every first century reader would recognize the bright and morning star would be planet Venus. Anyone with a little bit of astronomical knowledge today knows Jesus is referring to this planet next to us. Is this a certainty? A conviction I have? No, not yet. But Venus becomes a likely suspect. Venus could be exactly what these men saw that brought them to Jerusalem and then to Bethlehem. So that leads us to a second question. Venus, or another planet, not associated with a Jewish Messiah, why did they call it his star? Here we must move from what star it was, Venus or something else, to where it was in the sky. We have to move from astronomy, the study of the planets, to astrology, the study of the arrangement of the planets in the sky, into what we call constellations. Now let me be very quick first to say, this is what astrology looks like to us. Since before the earliest book in the Bible, humanity has looked up to the stars, divided the sky into constellations, seen figures there, imagined that they made up a human being, a face, a bull, and they imagined fanciful myths about them. And then they began to believe that these stars somehow impacted their individual and corporate destiny. I'm embarrassed to ask how many of you know what your astrological sign is. I know what mine is. I don't read the charts. I don't read astrology in order to find out what's going to happen to me during a day. But I know what sign I am. Do you? What sign were you born under? Here are the 12 signs, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. Let me be quick to say that the Bible does condemn astrology. Deuteronomy 4:19, take heed lest you lift your eyes to heaven, and when you see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the host of heaven, you feel driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord your God has given to all the peoples under the whole heaven as a heritage. Now I know, even if you do read your astrology charts every day, say, I don't worship them. Yeah, it was a serious matter to worship them. As a matter of fact, the death penalty was assigned. But I wonder, why do we waste space in a newspaper? Why do we waste time in our life looking to the stars for direction when we can look to the one who made the stars? Do the stars tell us what's going to happen to us? Well, that would mean that whatever's going to happen to us is going to happen to 1/12 of the entire human population. Kind of a ridiculous notion if you stop to think about it. But actually, it's not just worshiping the stars. Notice Isaiah 47 specifically says, now let the astrologers, the stargazers, and the monthly prognosticators stand up and save you from what shall come upon you. Behold, they shall be as stubble. The fire shall burn them. They shall not deliver themselves from the power of the flame. You want to find out what's going to happen to you? Don't ask the astrologers. God says, ask me. They can't change the future. They can try and predict it with some vague predictions that fit 1/12 of the entire human population. But astrology, yes, is condemned, but I want you to know that astronomy, the study of the stars themselves, is not. Studying God's creation is a good thing. Psalm 19:1 says, the heavens declare the glory of God. If we'll just look at them, they take our breath away and we recognize how great God is. when we look in a telescope or in a microscope, we can't help but be overwhelmed at the beauty, the intricacy, the order, the vastness, the power of creation. And if our universe is so vast and so powerful, how much more powerful must God be? I'm not afraid to study astronomy as if it will take away my faith in God. It actually makes my faith stronger. He knows the number of the stars. According to Psalm 147, verse 4, he alone counts the number of the stars. He calls them by name. Does he have his own name for them? You remember that God let Adam name the animals. Does God then call him what Adam called him? So maybe he let us name the stars, and then he calls the stars by what we call them, the names we choose, just like we get to choose the name of our children and everyone else uses the name we picked. You know, when we were younger, there was a big fad. It was a romantic gesture to name a star after someone you loved. And so you wrote away to some international astronomy society, and you could name a star after your loved one for $29.95. My wife heard it advertised, and not being very romantic, my wife said, "Oh, please, Jeffrey, don't ever waste any money doing that. I don't want a star named after me." So, of course, the very first thing I did was go out and name a star after. I didn't pay Astronomical Society $29.95. I printed up a fake one, gave it to her for Christmas, and she said, "Oh, I told you not to waste money on it." I did it just as a joke. We get to name the stars, but only God knows how many there are. God, and actually in the Bible, Job says God made not only the stars, but the constellations that made them up. Job chapter 9, verse 7, he seals off the stars, he alone spreads out the heavens, and treads on the ways of the sea. He made the bear, not the animal the bear, but the bear in the sky, and Orion and Pleiades. Now most of us are familiar with the night sky, but not near as much familiar as they were. We might be able to pick out the Big Dipper. We might be able to pick out some of the planets. But they would have recognized these. The bear, you may not know it, it's called Ursa Major, but you probably recognize the Big Dipper that makes up the body of the bear, makes up the hindquarters and the tail. You may know a little bit, if you know any astronomy, you may know Orion's belt, 3 stars in the sky that are pretty easy to pick out. You can find them most nights. That's the belt of Orion. Bear and Orion are not in the 12 constellations of the zodiac, but Pleiades actually is. Pleiades is a cluster of 12 visible stars in the shoulder of Taurus the bull. Taurus the bull is one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. So later in Job, God speaks and he asks him in Job 38:31, "Can you bind the cluster of Pleiades? Can you tame a bull? Can you tame the bull of the sky? Or loose the belt of Orion?" This is poetry. You can unbuckle your belt, but can you unbuckle those 3 stars in the sky? "Can you bring out Mazzaroth in its season?" Now, Mazzaroth is a Hebrew word, and it's the Hebrew word for constellations, and it means zodiac signs. In some versions, the NIV and the NAS, Mazzaroth is translated constellations. God's the one who rolls out the constellations every night. Or can you guide the great bear with its cubs? Here, God is talking about, I made those stars and I made the arrangements of those stars. Is there a contradiction here? No astrology, but astronomy is okay? Not actually. God created the stars. God put them where they are. He didn't arrange them necessarily maybe to make a bear that we would see, but God certainly knew what these stars' arrangements would look like from where we stand each night. And he knew beforehand, through his omniscience, what we would call them. He also knew, unfortunately, that we might worship them or look to them for direction. But here, I remind you, don't look to the stars for direction. Look to the God who made the stars. But notice this passage is not about the stars. It's about the one who made the stars. God is saying, I'm the one who can unbuckle the belt. I'm the one that can lead the bear. I'm the one who can bind the cluster of Pleiades. This is about the greatness of God, not about the power of the stars. So there is a unique historical situation, and in the first century, You see, all the world is looking at the stars. They don't have TV at night, so they're looking at the show that God puts on each night in the sky. And the rest of the world is fascinated with the stars. And the Jewish people are obsessively ignoring them. God had warned them not to worship the stars, so the Jews were pretty ignorant about astronomy. In a classic overreaction, God said don't worship them, so they ignored them. But these Greek word magi is wise men. They attach a lot of significance to stars. And they come and they say, where is he? We've seen the star for the King of the Jews who are born, and we have come to worship him. So here's the question we have to ask. What astronomical phenomena with astrological significance took place around the time of the birth of Christ? Astronomical, signs in the sky, with astrological significance. Somehow this arrangement of the stars in the sky would point them to someone born King of the Jews. Let me give you a likely suspect. Jupiter is the king planet. It is the second brightest star, the fourth brightest object in the sky after the sun, the moon, and Venus. And Jupiter is the king of planets. We know now it is the largest of the planets. It signified for them king. It crossed across Venus, which is called a conjunction, and the king planet crossed the mother planet. The second brightest planet crossed the brightest planet in a conjunction, which means a close encounter, on August 12th, 3 BC. Now, this is extremely rare. It happens about every 2 years, but not this close. Actually, Jupiter and Venus had a conjunction last January 22nd of 2019, and will come together again close. That will be as soon as February 11th, 2021. But that's only coming together pretty close. If you take all of the sky, that's divided into 360 degrees. If you divide it 360 ways, that's 1 degree. 1 degree is about 1 finger width as you hold your arm at arm's length. That would be about 1 degree. But an arc is 1/60th of a degree, kind of like a minute divided into seconds. So if you go 1/60th of your finger width, that's how much an arc is. 4.3 arcs is touching. So we saw last January, and we'll see next February, a near conjunction of Jupiter and Venus where they get close. But that is only by 20 arcs. 4.3 arcs are basically overlapping. So on March 15th, 2012, they came within 3 degrees. 3 degrees is 180 arcs. This conjunction on August 12th, 3 BC is 4 arcs, which means practically overlapping. They're not just touching, but practically overlapping. This is so rare that it only happens once in thousands of years. A conjunction happens every 2 years, but that could be your hands' widths apart. Now here, this would get our attention. In the same month, August 31st, 3 BC, there is a conjunction of Mercury and Venus. Mercury is the fastest moving one. It's the closest to the sun. And so if you're moving towards the sun, you go past Venus, then you go past Mercury. That was called the messenger god. And so the significance is, in August, there is a conjunction of the king and the mother stars. And when the mother and the king meet, actually, the mother star, which is smaller, covers over, engulfs the king, the larger star. Jupiter is much bigger, but Venus is closer. And so Venus eclipses the much larger Jupiter. So maybe the king is now inside the mother. But then a few months later, or a few weeks later, same month, August 31st, the messenger comes to the mother. A messenger, which is the Greek word angel, comes to the mother a few days later. There seems to be here a picture in the sky of what's going on in the Christmas story. But then, just a few weeks later, there is a conjunction of Jupiter and Regulus, a star in Leo. Now this is probably the most astrologically significant day in human history. September 11th, you remember 9/11/2001, 911 BC, Jupiter, the king star, the king planet, and Regulus, the king star, had a conjunction of 20 arcs, practically eclipsing one another. This would be, by the way, the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, their new year. This is so rare, Jupiter and Regulus, that it happens once every 7,000 years. So twice in recorded history. Regulus is the royal star from which we get the word regal, and it's the brightest star in the sky after the planets. It is the kingly star in the kingly constellation associated with Judah since Genesis 49:4. Remember, Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So this is Leo, one of the 12 constellations, and Regulus is right here in his chest, and Jupiter crosses and, of course, covers Regulus. Jupiter is the largest planet, but it covers the largest star, Regulus, in our evening sky. And so there is some significance, and they would associate that happening perhaps with the king of the Jews. On the very same day, now this is an amazing coincidence, on the very same day, September 11th, 3 BC, the sun crossed through the womb of Virgo with the moon beneath Virgo's feet. Now another one of the 12 constellations, maybe you're born and you're in Virgo, that means virgin. And here's what the Virgo Virgin looks like in the evening sky. Now I want you to know that on this day, September 11th, 3 BC, not only did Jupiter kind of get eclipsed, or eclipse Regulus in Leo, in the lion, but Virgo is got the sun in her womb. I want you to know that this sign might be explained in the Bible. It's been right under our noses all this time and we've never seen it. Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12 is a mystery to so many, but God wrote it to us to reveal. Revelation means reveal. Notice what Revelation 1:12 says. Now a great sign appeared in heaven. Do your ears prick up? A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then, here's the action, being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Now this great sign describes exactly what happened on September 11th, 3 BC. There was a great sign, a once in a lifetime, once in history convergence. It happened in heaven. There is a woman involved, a woman that we have seen for thousands of years. She's clothed with the sun because the sun crossed through Virgo. The moon was actually under her feet that night, and Virgo significantly has 12 stars in her crown. Virgo has a crown of 12 stars. There you see them pictured to the right. This amazing convergence of conjunctions that happen on the same day would be so significant that it would get these wise men up off their couches and out on the street and say, we've got to see this. This is amazing. It's once in a lifetime. It's once in history. Even if you don't follow Christ like these three wise men didn't. If you used astrology and you went back in the past, not in the future, don't ask the stars to tell you the future, but maybe you could go back to the past and say, all this happened in the sky on that night. What happened on September 11th, 3 BC? Here's what Revelation 12 is describing. Virgo was on her side, which is a woman's position in childbirth. The sun was passing through her from top to bottom from her womb down between her legs and exiting. The moon, of course, goes around the earth once a month, but it was passing. The sun was going between her legs and out the birth canal, and the moon, which travels around the earth once a month, was passing beneath her feet. Exactly what we saw in Revelation chapter 12. A great sign appeared to heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. This sign got the wise men's attention, and maybe now, for the first time, you can understand why. It got them packing. These things coming together, Leo and Regulus, and the sun in Virgo, and the moon under her feet, these would happen once every 228,000 years, once in history. So, they decide they're going to go. But something else happened in the sky. Jupiter did a funny dance. It's called a retrograde. We'll talk about that in a moment and explain. But Jupiter not only crossed across Regulus, but it stopped and it circled and it went back and it went around 3 times. 3 approaches, conjunctions, crowning Regulus. This is a final touching. You see, Jupiter and Regulus came within 51 arcs on February 17th, 2 BC. Jupiter and Regulus had another conjunction on May 8th, 2 BC, 43 arcs. Again, an arc is 1/60th of a degree. So half a degree, it's pretty close. But then there was another one, a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus on June 17th, 2 BC, and this one is 0 arcs. Jupiter and Venus now not only touched, but they eclipsed. Half of an arc, which is 1/120th of your finger. So right under their noses, right over their heads, in Jerusalem and Bethlehem, these signs were happening, but nobody was paying attention. As this was happening, as Jupiter was circling Regulus, nobody noticed it or noticed the significance if they even saw it. So what? That star's moving. They didn't track the stars. Do you see how significant it might have been, however, to these astronomers/astrologers? They saw signs that were right under the noses of everybody else, but it meant something to them, and they said, "Where's the one born king of the Jews?" They go, What do you mean? Maybe we have seen a star, we just never know. Maybe you've seen Venus and Jupiter and Regulus, you just never know. We have seen a star, we just never understood their significance. Remember, Matthew never says they followed the star Jerusalem. They went to Jerusalem because they were looking for the King of the Jews. They were told to go to Bethlehem. But how did the star lead them? Here is the question that we have to ask. How does the star lead them to Bethlehem or stand over where Jesus laid? Interestingly, they didn't have to ask directions because they were told, go south and southeast to Bethlehem. The word for east, they didn't even have a word for east. The word for east to them, Greek Anatoli, is literally rising. They would say, instead of saying east, they would say towards the sunrise. And so they are headed south because that's where Bethlehem is. And when it's sunrise, all the stars are appearing in the south, as we're on the northern hemisphere, and so are they. So they came from the east. Wise men came from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east." Now, are they saying, we saw his star while we were in the east? Or do they say, when we were in the east, it was in the east? If they saw it in the east on the east, they wouldn't have followed it because that would have taken them further from Jerusalem. So they're probably saying, we saw his star in the east while they were in the east, kind of like I shot an elephant in my pajamas. Well, what was the elephant doing in your pajamas? No, you're misunderstanding. They didn't see the star in the east, otherwise they would have been going towards China, not towards Europe. While they were in the east, they saw his star in the west, and it was westward leading. But they saw the star rising. They saw from the rising came to Jerusalem. It says, we have seen its star in its rising. So rising and east are the same word. Maybe they're saying from the rising came to Jerusalem. They came from the east, and they say, we saw his star in its rising. Maybe that's two different meanings. Either way, they have come west to find the star, to find the one that the star signifies. So maybe the location is not as specific as we thought, that it was leading them, that they were following the star. If they were following the star and it was in the east, they would have been going the other way. But we still want to investigate these two characteristics. Its sporadic appearance, stars, planets don't do that, and its southerly direction, going before them. Now, leaving Jerusalem, they would see it again. Did Jupiter disappear? No, probably not. Jupiter, of all the stars, would not have disappeared if it was a cloudy night. They all would have disappeared. But it probably just wasn't doing anything significant. But when, notice when verse 9, when they heard the king, they departed. Behold, the star which they had seen in its rising, also while they were in the east, went before them. So it was in front of them towards the south, and now it's doing something significant. What might that be? From Jerusalem to Bethlehem is a short 6-mile trip. They don't have to follow the star. All they got to do, the star would be going ahead of them in the southern sky, would be before them in the northern hemisphere. It would have been south. But what was it actually doing as it stood over, went before them and stood over where the young child was? Is this a supernatural laser beam like we see in our Christmas card pictures? Now, God could have done that. He could have done that for the wise men. Of course, the wise men would have been the only ones seeing that laser beam from the sky. Of course, they might have stopped and asked directions. Did you see any young couple that just had a baby? Stood over may not have been as much of guiding significance as, again, an astronomical significance. What might they have seen? I've talked several times already about a retrograde. All the rest of the stars in the sky move in a predictable pattern straight across the sky. They circle around our poles as our Earth turns. We're moving, they're moving through space as well. But because the planets are not going around the Earth or the Earth spinning around, they're going around the sun the same time as we are. Whenever we reach a certain point in our circle around the sun, they have a retrograde motion where it seems to, instead, while it's going this way, all of a sudden it kind of stops, and then it starts going back the other way, and then it stops again, and then it starts going back the way it was before. Now, Jupiter has not stopped and done a 360, but actually from where we are, as we turn and it goes around the sun, it appears to, this is what we call a retrograde. And this happens every 12 to 15 months. Does Jupiter do this at that time and cause them to rejoice? Jupiter, all of a sudden, after moving across and conjoining with Venus, now starts its conjunction. And instead of moving predictably as it does for a long time, all of a sudden it circles around. As a matter of fact, it did. As a matter of fact, it did in the very womb of Virgo, which it had done a year earlier in Leo. And so now it is doing another conjunction, which it does every year. Last year it did its conjunction in Leo, the sign of the king, the lion. Now it is doing its conjunction in the very womb of Virgo, the Virgin Mary. And significantly, it was on December 25th, 2 BC, during Hanukkah season, when the Jews were giving gifts. Wow, does that give you goosebumps? December 25th, what we celebrate as Christmas, probably not his birthday. His birthday's probably March 11th. But on December 25th, the wise men see the star, and they see it retrograde and circle in the very womb of Virgo. And it happens on December 25th, our Christmas, but their Hanukkah, and all of the Jews are giving each other gifts and celebrating unknowingly the birth of Jesus. Wow. So we actually kind of have dates. The shepherds probably saw the angel on Christ's birthday, September 11th, 3 BC, and the wise men got to Bethlehem on March 25th in 2 BC, on actually December 25th, 2 BC. Did God move the stars in order to signify all of this? Did God orchestrate them? We know God works all things together for good. God knew how the stars would appear to us from our unique vantage point in the universe when Jesus was born and when the wise one would be coming. But wow, this is more than just a coincidence, isn't it? In the sky, there was this just PowerPoint lesson. God did all of this to point to his son, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, being born of a virgin. And remember, he came to be born of a virgin to die for you. God went to a lot of trouble to bring his son into the world. God went to a lot of trouble of illustrating it in the sky by moving the stars. God also went to a lot of trouble to bring you to watch this video. God loves you, and he sent his son, and he signified it with a star in the night to tell you, I love you, and I sent my son to die for you. 700 years earlier, one of the first Persian magi, his name was Daniel. Remember, Daniel was a wise man in the kingdom of Babylon and Persia. This Jewish wise man named Daniel wrote, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament. And those who turn many to righteousness are like the stars forever and ever. You want to be a star for God? Being a star for God doesn't mean how brightly you shine. It just means you lead them to Jesus. The star may not have been that bright. Jupiter is one of the brightest stars in the night sky. But it wasn't its brightness. It's there every night. It was leading people to Jesus, and that's the most important thing you can do. If you want to be a star for God, he says, turn people to righteousness and you'll be a star with God. I think it's a fantastic lesson in the skies that is confirming to us that God went to a lot of trouble to bring his virgin-born son in the world to die for our sins. Let's thank him for it. Lord, thank you for the show that you put on the skies that on that night that so many missed, but we thank you that some saw it and gathered its significance. And the significance to us is that Jesus was born of a virgin, died on a cross, rose from the grave, and is now seated at the right hand of the Father and coming again. Lord, thank you for giving us all these confirming signs. Help us not to miss them. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. We won't be online the next 2 weeks. Next week is our candlelight service on Sunday night. The following week we'll be off. We'll see you again in the new year.